Good morning, friends. It is a pleasure to have you all here in this live session. As always, the team of the certificate program in environmental sustainability, is very keen to bring you the latest and the most relevant inputs regarding environmental sustainability. And as such, we look forward to the experts in various fields to come over to the studio at our invitation and present their research findings in various aspects related to environmental sustainability. And today is no different. Today we have a very eminent expert who is a sociologist of repute, Dr. Sujata Dutta Hazarika, who will be sharing her inputs on a very important and vital topic, which is so significant in today's India. That is deconstructing sustainability through natural capital and ecosystem services approach. And she will be basing her presentation on based on the reflections from post-colonial marginalities and indigenous cultures of Northeast India. And as we all know, friends, sustainability has now come to be the byword in most international discussions. Even in the recently concluded G20 summit, there was a lot of discussion on sustainable development and how indigenous communities can also be brought into the fold to ensure that they also gain from the process of sustainable development. And we all know, and as we have gone through the various modules, you would have come to realize that over a period of time, a lot of issues have cropped up, including climate change, unsustainable use of bio and other natural resources, so on and so forth, which has affected the quality of life of communities across the world. And we also know that many of the communities may find themselves in peril very soon due to the impact of climate change and various other problems that they are facing from time to time. So this is a very relevant and important topic for the day. And I'm sure that the inputs Dr. Hazarika will be providing us will be of great relevance, and it will form part of the course material as well. Today, we are also joined by Dr. Sindhu P. Nair, Regional Director, IGNOU Regional Centre Kolkata, and Dr. P.T. Jaljakumari, Assistant Regional Director, IGNOU Regional Centre Cochin. I welcome all three of you to this very important program. And shortly, I'm sure we will be joined by Dr. Prasida Unnikrishnan also, who is also part of this course team. So without much ado, let me request my colleague, Dr. P.T. Jaljakumari, to introduce our guest for the day, Dr. Sujata Dutta Hazarika. Over to you, ma'am. Madam, please unmute.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It is indeed our privilege to invite and to introduce Dr. Sujata Dutta Hazarika, an eminent sociologist with 18 years of experience in research in the areas of sustainability and public policy, governance, sustainable development, education, and natural resource management. She is the founder faculty of sociology in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Guwahati, from 2004. In 2009, she initiated the Northeast Centre for Research and Development, IGNOU, as the overall in charge of the national center established by Indira Gandhi National Open University to facilitate public policy research in Northeast India. NECRD, IGNOU, was set with the objective to create a think tank for the region to document, to facilitate, and manage its authentic database for its vast, diverse, and unexplored natural and biocultural resources that could facilitate and impact public policy and development planning in Northeast India. Also, she was awarded the Fulbright Senior Research Fellowship for the year 2010-11 and hosted by Institute of the Study of Societal Issues, ISSI, University of California, Berkeley, to work on eco-village initiatives in United States. Understanding social change in the new consciousness of sustainability. This was her area of research. and she is the recipient of full doctoral research fellowship by ICSSR and FMSH Foundation of this science from France, the frame for the Indo-French program of cooperation in social sciences. 2016, she was invited to a scientist visitorship at the INRA, and um, this was given her a chance to do her contributions in the agricultural field, again in France, to work on a research project, a comparative study of organic farming in Assam, India, with the French model of organic farming emphasizing enhanced capacities of informal, indigenous, and local knowledge through formal strategies of ICT and sustainable business management. And Madam Sujata is the founder of EISDP, Global Initiative for Sustainable Development and Planning. North-South, again, a think tank, a tank initiative to redefine economic and business through sustainable public policy grounded on innovation, inclusion, access, equity, and environment. Currently, she is the additional director of Indira Gandhi National Open University Regional Centre Kolkata, and her services dedicated and aligned to the broader mandate of IGNOU, democratize education for the creation of an based inclusive knowledge based society through the technology mediated open and distance learning. Her recent books, New Age Hunger Games, Warring Farmers and the Violence of Sustenance, published by Bookwell Publishers, New Delhi, and another book, The Sustainability Conflict and the Global Systemic Crisis. This is also focused on the Assam's forgotten nomads, and this is also published by Bookwell Publishers, New Delhi. And these two books are widely spread and discussed among the scholars. Once again, I tell that this is a wonderful opportunity for the MOOC team and the students of this MOOC to have such an eminent scholar to discuss a very relevant topic today, as we are facing climate change and its impacts in the various fields of life, our day-to-day life, our agricultural field, and everything. And we are nowadays thinking the knowledgeable people, they are always thinking to go back a little bit to utilize the indigenous culture and knowledge of the India. Madam, with very much heartfelt thanks and happiness, we are welcoming you to uh, our session, today's session, to facilitate our students, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajesh, Dr. Jalja Kumari. Thank you so much for the generous introduction. You've already made me feel, so good about whatever humble work that I could have produced till now, and it is a privilege to be here. I would, if, shall we, shall I start with the thing, or can we? Shall I start with my presentation? And
Sure, ma'am. I think you can start with the presentation.
thank you very much. And once again, of course, it's a great privilege to be here and to be participating and contributing to this certificate program. As as we could not overemphasize the significance of the topic that you have, you have organized, and to what extent we need to reflect on this situation cannot be overemphasized, because everything ultimately, whether we are in the political field or in the academic field or in any kind of field, everything is bringing us back to understanding how can we move on sustainably. And it's not just there was a time when sustainability and environmentalism were just two instruments in the path of development, so they were vital tools in the hands. But now it is all we have. It is all we have, because there is no other way of moving ahead other than reflecting on different dimensions of sustainability or environmentalism. I will I will start my presentation. Is my presentation visible?
Yes, ma'am. If
Okay.
required, you can put it in full screen mode.
Yes, full screen. Yes, I did put it in full screen. Is it? It is in full screen in my laptop.
No
Are you
problem,
seeing
ma'am.
it? Okay.
Please continue, because in from our end we are seeing it not in the full screen mode, but the slaughter view only. No problem. You can continue, ma'am. No, it is visible.
Yes. So this session is about understanding post-development policy planning. And post-development policy planning, as we are in the particular era that we are talking about, is fundamentally associated with the structures that we are going to include here, and which is again on through structures of environmentalism and sustainability. These are vital tools to understand our public policy at this point of time. And of course, natural resources are a fundamental aspect of this entire worldview, because coming from the kind of society that we live in, which is an extremely energy dependent society, fuel centric society, and at every point of time, the way we handle and the way we approach our natural resources will be a vital means through which our future will be designed, and the future vision we can envision. So when we talk of the basic paradox in this situation is that, firstly, we have a society which is completely energy dependent. We cannot do anything today without energy, without depending on energy, and all our fundamental institutions are based on energy consumption. So when energy becomes our fundamental citadel of our civilization, we have natural resources, which are the main source through which energy can be procured. And natural resources is finally in crisis, because not every part of the world, as we are all aware of, if you see the history of human civilization, and if we see the colonial history of our the of our civilizational history, we will see that different points of different societies have at different points of time exploited these resources in different ways. So if you see the stage of history and the way history has taken unfolded before us, uh, every we are at a point of time when natural resources have come, and it is concentrated on in very very small pockets of globally, because already the colonial masters have made sure that most of the colonies were completely extracted, and they were used for development. And after that, post-colonial policy planning has also shown that it was like passing on the bucket from the colonizers to the national to nationalism, and after that, from nationalism, we are now talking about the peripheral societies in different nations. So what I really mean is that all over the world, globally, there are pockets of civilizations, of indigenous cultures, which are the last entrants in the global discourse of sustainability, and also in the global policy planning and development planning. Now, since the concentration of natural resources are in these communities become extremely valuable in for the others. It is the same discourse of the developed society and between the developed society and the developing society, between the rich nations and the poor nations, and between rich communities and the poor communities. It kind of unfolds into different levels. So if we are talking about the richer nations and the vis-a-vis the poorer nations, we also have to talk about within the richer nations, the richer communities and the poorer communities, and then again within the richer communities, between the haves and the have-nots. So this leveling keeps on crumbling in different in different levels, and one needs to understand how, when we are making public policy and when we are trying to devise public policy and in development planning today, how natural resources and the kind of perspective that we have towards natural resource management becomes very, very important. I will get into a further differentiation, but this particular slide is a kind of a conceptual understanding of how I tried to visualize this session today. So you
Madam,
see,
interrupt
yes,
you. I think
yes,
your slide is not moving, ma'am.
my slide is not
Moving. It's not moving. It's still on the
okay.
first this thing, PPT only. Oh, okay. Now it's fine. Now it is changed.
Yes, I will keep it in the first PPT because I'm still describing the first PPT myself,
Okay, fine,
right?
fine.
So we
Sorry.
will go into the second. So what I wanted the participants to focus on in this particular slide is that public policy will have to take in a notice of natural resource management. This is on one side of the energy dependence fulcrum that we have, and of course when we have natural resource management through public policy, the prevalent capitalist system displays a kind of an economic invisibility of nature, as though when we make public policy, there should not the visibility of nature becomes very less. And this what I'm talking about is not fundamentally right now, because this is the stage when we are talking of more visibility of nature. But if you see historically, and if you see the way the capitalist mode of production has evolved, we will see that at every stage of public policy there has been an economic invisibility of nature. So we have not taken nature and its contribution economically very seriously, and we thought that nature could be exploited to the extent for the benefit of mankind without taking into consideration how nature was being exploited. So one way of what that has resulted is we have created a capitalist mode of society where it has become very difficult to think about anything outside the economic purview of economic purview of society. So as though everything in society has to be understood only in terms of economic value. If there is anything if there's anything which is definitely present in society, but we cannot value them or assess them in terms of economic parameters or models, those things have been sidelined or marginalized. In that sense, this particular session also discusses, we will later on reflect, as I said, this slide is a kind of a summary of our entire presentation out here. So when we talk of economic dominance in society, there has also been a effort to find out solutions from within that particular paradigm of society. So within the paradigm of economic paradigm, solutions are also being sought within the economic paradigm. And one of the reflections that we are going to engage in today's in today's presentation, which is about natural capital and ecosystem services, as you can see, the very term of natural capital ecosystem services is an attempt of indoctrinating into economy or economic credentials into natural services or nature as we know it. There can be two different approaches in that, and we are going to talk about it, why we could approach this understanding or this the solutions through a market centric neoliberalism policy, so which could be seen in the way we are going to look in exactly after after a particular in the way we try to demarcate, or in the way I'm going to try and talk about natural capital approach, you will see how it is again an effort to bring market-centric neoliberalism into our conservation and into our sustainability policies. The other system is, again, which I will also discuss later on, is to see this from the point of view of the indigenous communities. Because for the indigenous communities, nature has never been a market centric, it has never been a source of augmenting or increasing the market value of things. It has always been appreciated because of its intrinsic use value, its intrinsic qualities of say spiritualism or human connections. Nature has always been viewed, and you can find a drastic difference of the way we look at nature now. And that's why our solutions that we find are also ingrained within the paradigm of neoliberalism. The Now, obviously, the way society should be normatively viewed should be in a balanced way. So we have interrelated structure with a balance which has a normative and a functional value. The normative and functional value of the different institution, whether we talk of economy, polity, culture, society, family, it should have been all on a balanced platform. There should not have been a bigger institution than the others. But unfortunately, what has happened through the capitalistic social system is we have created a social system and a systemic crisis because of the overemphasis on the left side. As you can see, economy, polity, because polity drives economy, but economy still has a very, very large, heavy weight on it. And culture, society, and all other dimensions have taken a much more lighter model in that. And society, having evolved into the pinnacle of capitalistic consciousness, finds it is impossible to value any function or any contribution through sentiments that are intrinsic or intangible and transcendental without any quantifiable economic parameters. So the moment we move out of economy, we become shaky and we don't know how to really devise any kind of policy planning for that matter. Let me come to this. This is the existing slide of the status of the safe operating space that the universe or the global situation poses before us. This is a popular online image of the safe operating space for humanity, which was published by the Stockholm Resilience Center, and which estimates how the different control variables for 7 planetary boundaries have changed from 1950 to the present. The current thing must have changed even after this, because this is also not a very current evaluation, but you can see that even at that time, the way the red marks have increased and the only safe operating space of the green areas is so very little. So we are left with chemical pollution, which is not yet quantified, little small place which is there. But you see the biodiversity loss, it is growing in an alarming rate. And as I said, if we investigate and if we see the data of the present, which unfortunately I was not able to access, this must be a much more alarming situation now than it was at that time. Now, this does not mean, however, that we need to be constrained in the quality of our lives. We do not need to be the quantity. Are the slides moving now that I'm changing the slides?
Yes, they are moving.
Okay.
No problem. They are moving.
All right. So Now that we have confronted and we have understood the kind of urgency and the kind of emergency situation that the global sustainability and the discourse of global sustainability is bringing before us, it does not mean, however, that we need to be constrained in the quality of our lives and the quantity of our consumption. It simply means that we are now to look for solutions and visions of well-being that considers our limitation. We have to be understanding that both from the biophysical and from the habitual perspective, we human beings and our society is a limited society, and we have to thus adopt choices that best addresses these limitations in our social framework. The truth is that we still don't know how to make a world or build a society that is environmentally sustainable, shareable with everybody on the planet, which promotes stability, democracy, and human rights, and which is achievable in the time frame which is given to us in terms of the challenges that we are facing. Let us understand why environmentalism. It's not that environmental concerns of environmentalism or environmental perspective is a new perspective. This has been there with us for quite some time, although, as I had mentioned earlier, starting from if we talk of classical historical stages in the human civilization, and even after that, if we go starting from enlightenment, and then after that to ushering in of modernity, and then coming of capitalism as an influence, as an affluence form of social setup. If you see these different stages, we will see that there used to be a kind of an apathy about how we understand nature. Everywhere there used to be a kind of an invisibility of nature in the way society was envisioned, because it almost seemed, even from biblical times, that that nature was there to be taken for granted, and it was there to shower its blessings, to shower its in a very very in a free mode for human beings, and human beings had a right to exploit nature for their own benefit. It was so we have seen how it had continued in historically, but later on, of course, post modernity and post capitalism. I will not say post capitalism, because we are still in the phase of neoliberalism and capitalism in a different form. But when with the coming of social philosophers like Marx and critics of capitalism who had come, they also did not have much to contribute on how nature should be taken into consideration. Nature should be internalized in the discourse of social organization. So what happened afterwards was there was a blatant realization that something was going wrong, and we need to understand environment and nature in a completely different form. The mechanistic model of capitalism, which was a gift from Western worldview, came to humanity, when came to humanity with the promises of scientific evolution and an affluence of capitalism. But it also made nature and communities and the very subject of the very contributors, or for which the capitalistic mode of production was there in the first place, it was marginalized. So both communities, nature, livelihood, support of community, everything somehow got externalized, and the value of capitalist mode of production never brought communities and nature into their purview. This needed to be corrected, and we had the emergence of course, environmentalism and sensitivity towards nature, and looking at nature as a valuable asset suddenly came out. It emerged as a new way of thinking. However, environmentalism has by far been unsuccessful in driving any concrete strategies for integrating nature into the DNA of social systems, primarily because it was more often concentrated on things that was not to be done rather than what can possibly done. So although they were telling, they had a verdict of saying do not cut trees, do not water should not be made impure, plastic should not be used. But although the do nots or what need not be done was emphasized, what needed to be done, the positive constructive steps that needed to be taken were not highlighted. So while it has been largely unsuccessful in bringing before us disasters of oil spill, it did bring before us all these disasters of deforestation, river erosion, flooding, biodiversity loss, livelihood destruction. It has not in any certain ways or in any significant ways provided solution in terms of positively implementable actions. In fact, Anthony Lazarowitz, the Yale expert on climate change, has mooted that environmental crisis is elongated in time. It is global in scale, interwoven in global trends far beyond the scope of conventional environmentalism, because environmental crisis is not just a crisis which is embedded in the nature alone. It is not any longer an isolated issue. It is separate from interwoven issues of sustainability, such as advances of technology, communication, and of course, which all of these lead to conflict of some kind or the other. One of the primary reasons for our inability so far to integrate concerns of nature into the processes and structures of social system, and particularly in this case in the public policy domain, has been because of the invisibility of nature in the decision making and in the public concerns. It is now being increasingly felt that society, having evolved into the pinnacle of capitalistic consciousness, it is impossible to value any function or contribution through sentiments that are intrinsically intangible and transcendental, which does not have any quantifiable economic parameters. We realize this, and there is a greater effort now to bring nature into this fold of neoliberalism. Let us say, to bring nature into the capitalist fold, which is just the first step, if I may add, from the stage of capitalist mode of production that and the affluence that it had promised to bring about in society. From that stage to coming to the stage where we can actually commodify nature and bring nature within the capitalist mode of society. This is just a first mode of our. I'm sorry. This is the first step that we are making towards having a greater understanding of sustainability, probably. However, there is a strong scientific and empirical foundation that points to the connection between sustainable stewardship of ecosystem management and human well-being. So the way we have moved ahead, the way society has moved ahead now, and the kind of knowledge that we have about society, we are now aware of all. We are in a very significant stage of human history where we know how the economic processes work, we know how the biological processes work, and we know how the ecosystem and the biodiversity connection works between humanity and between nature. We are aware of photosynthesis, which is a direct connections. We are aware of how biodiversity losses also lead to repercussions on human life. We actually have data to support all these belief systems, and scientific reflections and scientific understanding of society has taken us far ahead in the way we address social issues and connect them to natural phenomena now. We also know that how we manage resources and how we manage our ecosystem, our biodiversity, our landscape, our seascape, our oceans, and river sources and forests will ultimately decide whether we can aspire for food security, whether we can aspire for energy security, whether we can move towards economic prosperity and social stability. And, and hence, it becomes extremely important to focus on natural resource management as one of the fundamental areas of public policy, and how exactly natural resource management can take place. We are going to see further whether we need to stay, whether it is going to be effective if we stay within the neoliberalism paradigm, or whether we need a separate paradigm to move on to from there, or whether we need a culmination of other paradigms to come together to view natural resource management in the first place. Because once we understand the risk that bad natural resource management can create, it becomes very evident that this is an area which needs an urgent attention from any public policy requirement. I just have a slide out here which I wanted to share with you, because as I was discussing till now, it seems natural resource management can only be possible if we stay within the paradigm of capitalistic viewpoint, where nature is commodified and we put actual valuation to services that we procure from nature. And I just thought I would also at this time, this is the relevance of Northeast India, but before Northeast India, I would also like to bring before you the significance of the indigenous communities and the way indigenous communities who have been marginalized in the post-colonial, somehow in the colonial public policy planning, and later on in the post-colonial public policy planning, they have been somehow marginalized, or rather used for for the benefits that were seen they had, and the benefits that these communities were seen to have was that the areas that they lived had high concentration of natural resources, and hence the kind of their ecosystem and the way they lived, the way their the society was organized was so much so much less dependent on power consumption or energy dependent, and they were so balanced in their outlook of sustainable living that that their natural environment managed to keep or sustain all the natural resources that the mainstream society was hungering for. So you see out here, when we talk about the different the worldview, which is so different from capitalistic worldview, here the chief Seattle, this of course is I just wanted to give a kind of a global viewpoint out here. The chief Seattle of the American Indians, his view was that when he was talking about his own natural environment, he said there is no quiet place in your cities, no place to hear the leaves of spring or the rustle of insect wings. The Indians prefer the soft sound of the wind darting over the face of the pond, the smell of the wind itself cleansed by the midday rain or scent of pine. How does one quantify these into economic parameters? I mean, this is my question to the when I try to introduce a completely different worldview into our discussion of natural resource management here today. Not only the chief Seattle, who is a popular American Indian, anecdote in the US, but in India and in the global South also, there are communities of indigenous communities who live all over, and Northeast India is one such locale which has a concentration of a number of about more than 300 indigenous communities who had lived very close to nature and in sustainable and in very, very sustainable ways of living. I'm not yet getting into the favorable, it is not an understanding of saying that the capitalist mode of the capitalist worldview, which created so much of affluence and a dynamic society, but also created a lot of degradation in the natural resources and communities, are not to be taken. But the I will keep that choice. I will leave that choice in for you to take, because my job here is to just put up these two worldviews in front of you so that we can find a comparison and we can see how exactly we can, in our public policy planning, can benefit from both these worldviews. And this also brings me to the attempts to create visibility of nature. As I had earlier said, visibility of nature could happen from the neoliberalism point of view, and it could also happen from the other point of view, which I have just introduced, the commons paradigm as the indigenous knowledge system, or the as we are going to see after this. But staying within, I will also refer to a classical sociologist in these things, who was concerned about what are the parameters that bring society together. When we talk about, in his book The Division of Labor, Emil Durkheim argued that social solidarity, which forms the basis of collective conscience in different society, there is something which brings every social member come together and agree to the way social formations run in society, right? So the collective conscience take different forms in different historical periods. When I was talking about the earlier point of the earlier age of modernity, post modernity, and now again, the post development stage of where sustainability and environmentalism, one thing is common, that all this is all these aspects and perspectives all form part of a worldview. It's the way that every individual in society start looking at society, that together in a collective way becomes the basis of how social formations are formed. Now, according to him, if we talk of traditional society, and in historical, historically, if we talk about, if we make a dichotomy between traditional and modern society, we will see that traditional societies, which had simple pre-industrial social cohesion, and people came together in an interpersonal relationship, in those type of societies where there was more interdependence and more consensus based on similarities, because they agreed to certain overarching social norms, social behavior, social traditions. So this was the fundamental basis on which the agreement and social cohesion took place, the agreement which was based on similarities, because they all agreed on the similarities of how society should appear before them, and what were the collective norms and values and norms and traditions that were to be followed. And as we evolved into a more complex society, as we evolved into more complex form of society, and the capitalist mode of society came into being, it was not only the economic issues that were affected, but also the way people started looking at society, and the way their value system of how what are the value system on which people agreed upon. And in this society, which Durkheim calls as the organic solidarity, vis-a-vis the mechanical solidarity, which was based on agreement of similarities, and in the organic solidarity, which was based on agreement of differences. For example, if we see modern society, in modern societies people agree to disagree, although each and every person, it is so individualism and individualism and impersonality and economic growth is so ingrained in this social value system that people ultimately agree to disagree, and they believe that as long as there was a benefit individually for them, society could come together and mitigate their normal differences. But in the traditional society, these normal differences became a big thing. And and the kind of, if we see that kind of legal system that this old society, that traditional society had, and if you see the legal system that modern society has, this will become very clear to us. In the traditional society with mechanical solidarity, any flouting of norms, any flouting of, say we talk about how in traditional society marriages took place only between certain communities, people ate in certain ways, people lived in certain ways, and any flouting, even our caste system for that matter, any flouting of norms, social norms, was addressed in a very, very severe manner. Punishments were very, very severe. They were ousted from society, they were, ostracized, and they were taken out. However, if you see modern society and if you see our modern judicial system, we will find the laws, instead of being instead of being retributive, they are more restitutive in nature. They want to bring back status quo in nature, so people are not just hung because they have done something. And there's so much of discourse that happens in terms of, if there is one if there is one case of hanging, which is a thing, and a verdict given, entire society goes against it and tries to argue, because primarily punishments are not seen as restitutive. They are not seen as retributive, but they are seen as restitutive, to bring back the social order. Now, in this kind of a scenario, obviously economic, in the traditional form of society, economy was just one of the social institutions which was encompassed by all the other social institutions. Family became important, culture became important, religious institutions became important. Economy was only a part of it. So everything that happened, even an harvest festival which had economic objective, took a form of a cultural festival in a society like that. However, if we are talking from a neoliberal point of view, and we are talking about organic solidarity, economy becomes, as I was describing earlier, economy becomes one of the most fundamental areas of focus, and it kind of topples every other aspect. And so it also topples the most intrinsic value that nature could have, in terms of, its value in terms of realization of the self, and all these intrinsic value of transcendental values of spiritualism. Everything that is associated with nature becomes is marginalized when we come into the neoliberal thought of understanding. And of course, I will get into the commons paradigm. In that sense, my focus here is to bring before all of you how we need to also look at natural resource management from a different perspective, the perspective that is given from the indigenous community point thing, and which has also been an understanding in the, as there's a, there have been works done by David Bollier in his recent book, The Wealth of the Commons. He actually talks about how to create a world beyond market and the state, and in that he talks about how the commons paradigm can also be a paradigm to look into when we manage our collective resources in society. Now, talking about the neoliberalism, staying within the neoliberalism, organic solidarity, or the dominance of economy, as is seen in the neoliberalism paradigm. There are two very important work that I would like to discuss out here, which both this work coins this term called natural capitalism, and it has brought this whole thing of this whole thing of the new economy of nature, the quest of making conservation profitable, through the natural capital project. And so these are two fundamental works that I have shared earlier, and these two work needs to be looked into by you. One is the work by Paul Hawkins, Amory Lovins, and Hunter Lovins, who wrote Natural Capitalism, which creating the next industrial revolution. And they were the first to coin the term natural capitalism. Their ideas emerged from the simple logic that since without nature there is no life or people, without people there can be no economic activity. So although capitalism very simplistically is the investment made in capital for profit, however, capitalism as we know it is inherently incongruent with the internally inconsistent, because it violates the most basic percept such the most basic parameters of capitalism, which are the people and nature. So their work is an attempt to bring nature into the background of economy, and as an attempt has been made to correct the unnatural nature of capitalism by emphasizing its most valuable capital, which is natural capital, and ecosystem services that constantly flow free towards people and communities. So nothing is basically free, and it should not be taken as for granted. Everything that we procure from nature should be given a particular value, whether we talk of water, whether we talk of air, whether we talk of the entire photosynthesis and its services of biodiversity. Everything needs to be given a particular value, and only then can we have a conservation model which will value nature. The second work is by Gretchen Daly and Ellison in their book, The New Economy of Nature, The Quest to Make Conservation Profitable. It contributed to the Natural Capital Project. They worked on Natural Capital Project, and Gretchen Daly is a co-founder and the director of the Natural Capital Project, which introduced the objectives of this path-breaking science to merge biological conservation and ecology with economics. Widely influential in the United Nations latest incorporation. Her project was very influential in the United Nations latest incorporation of the clause of ecosystem services evaluation as a parameter in the in environmental impact assessment, which is undertaken by the United Nations. Now, what is natural capital and ecosystem services approach? This is an endeavor to create a science that seeks to merge conservation and ecology with economy, with an aim to eradicate the economic invisibility of nature in public policy and decision making. It is a science based on valuing the ecosystem services based on interaction between ecosystem and people in a mutually beneficial system. Creation of an ecosystem. They use scientific models and parameters to actually put values to all these intrinsic services that nature provides to humanity. It emphasizes the fact that since people and society receive a number of benefits from ecosystem and the natural world, they need to be duly acknowledged and paid for in terms of the benefits. Natural capital is basically the stock of biological, physical, and cultural resources from which this stream of benefits flow. And natural capital is the investment account, and ecosystem services are the dividends paid out to the people and communities in the form of happiness, well-being, procuring things that one needs like food, shelter, stable natural and climatic conditions, stable natural and climatic conditions, and protection from natural disasters. All this we take for granted, but this approach emphasizes we cannot really do something like that. Daly, in her book, presents case studies where companies or governments were able to her work was primarily in the United States, and she works to show that companies or governments, both companies and governments, were able to actually profit from their conservation efforts. They describe how New York decided to meet federal requirements to improve their water quality with a less expensive, though more controversial, option of protecting their watershed integrity through land purchases and development limits, rather than adopt a technological solution of a multi-billion-dollar treatment facility. So instead of investing hugely into a multi-billion-dollar treatment facility, they bought watershed areas which had watershed integrity, and they protected those and created a long-term benefit to improve the water quality of in the state of New York. Now they also offer an assessment of the plans to manage and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by developing a worldwide system of carbon trading patterned on the US experience with pollution. We will get into this very interesting understanding of carbon trading, which is patterned by the US experience with pollution, a little later, when we try to understand the loopholes of this perspective. And of course, there was an exemplary rigor in the 2005 Millennium Ecosystem Assessment was organized and classified and grouped the services of nature that benefited our communities. And what were the services? They were provisional, regulatory, cultural, and supportive. What are the provisional services that nature provides? They provide provisional services of utilitarian values, like say water, timber, food, fish. The regulatory services are of flood control, climate regulation. Cultural services, of course, are nature's intrinsic values in terms of aesthetics, spirituality that give us happiness and well-being. And finally, the supporting ecosystem services, which are not visible or which does not come out in the manifest level. For example, the nutrient cycling, which makes our the soil fertile, and the photosynthesis support, which gives us pure oxygen, and on which all these other three services are based on. The natural capital project. What is the real outcome of natural capital project? Natural capital project, in spite of its invaluable repertoire of building an ecosystem database, they have very successfully contributed to creating an ecosystem database, which is undoubtedly the primary foundation for any serious environmental governance policy globally. Without a serious database, no such policy making is possible. But it is also unfortunately an effort to stay within the paradigm of but again it is an effort to stay within the existing paradigm of capitalistic values of commoditization of nature. Now I'd like to bring to your notice at this time a very famous quotation by Albert Einstein, who said, when you look for solution, do not look for solution within the same thing. Try to look for solution coming out of the paradigm. Because when you look for solution within the same paradigm, the same problems continue. So this is just to kind of bring into the thing, the problems that can happen. As an effective intervention to develop tools for natural resource management, it can claim high rates in the authenticity of scientific representation, ecological mapping, because they rely very efficiently on biogeography. So the ecological mapping is very intrinsically done by this project, and they use tools like Invest, and there are software tools which are used in order to make these databases. However, one does wonder if it can claim accuracy of evaluation of ecosystem services whose functional complexity of purpose, interconnections, and valuations transcend both the objective rationality of scientific models as well as the subjective limitations of applications of science. So somehow these models, to what extent can these models actually justify the functional complexity of the way nature functions, the purpose, the interconnections in the nature, the values which transcend the objective rationality of scientific models? Can these scientific models actually account for the objective rationality of these models? It is left to be seen, and there are far-reaching criticism for all these matters. Now, obviously, I've made my point clear that this, although it having this particular trying to stay within this paradigm has created a lot of understand a kind of a sensitization of why one needs to take access, or there has been a sense to, why we need to make or why we need to appreciate these services which we have been taking for granted for ages. So this project definitely makes something, but a major concern arises in its capacity to scale and replicate success stories in different paths. For example, if a success story or a scenario can be built up in one particular place and said that a particular say an eco village resort was which had a touristic value for, and also an economic implication in terms of employing individuals in that local place and generating income of a of a high grade. If it worked in a particular area, can one say for sure that the same thing will work on a different area with the same scientific validity? So these kinds of problems came up. Now this brings us, of course, to the purpose of how indigenous I want to contextualize Northeast India in the global discourse of sustainability. Northeast India, as one is aware of, it is a culmination of 8 states, and together the 8 states of Northeast India shares over 2,000 kilometers of border with Bhutan, China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, and are connected to the rest of India through a narrow 20-kilometer wide corridor, which is known as the Chicken Neck in Siliguri. The northeastern region of India comprises of states of Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, Mizoram, Nagaland, and Sikkim, can be physiogeographically categorized into the Eastern Himalayas. At the confluence of the Indo-Malayan and Indo-Chinese and Indian biogeographical lens, the northeastern region displays a bewildering diversity of language, ethnicity, culture, livelihood, and environment, and is unique in providing a profusion of habitats which features diverse biota with a high level of endemism. The region is also a abode of approximately 225, I think the count has risen, out of 450 in the country, the culture and customs of which have been important role in understanding biodiversity conservation and management issues. Now, most of these tribals live a sustainable life and very lived rather, and I'm also you will be very right to say that things have changed very much in terms of urbanization and rural urban migration, and the way cities in the northeast area have evolved. I would also like to say that I have merged all these different states together only for the sake of conceptual convenience, because all these states are all housed to indigenous communities which are very, very diverse, and it is almost a misnomer to club them together under a single under a terminological thing like Northeast India, because they are all extremely different and unique in terms of their habitats and in terms of their thing. Now, however, they come together from the point of view as a conceptual construct, because from the point of view of India's post-development policy planning, Northeast India was clubbed together as one full region because it displayed high density of natural resources and biodiversity concentration, and it is a sprawling, and also because from the point of view of its significance to sustainable global discourse of sustainability, we can take Northeast India as one single conceptual whole. In that sense, it is extremely vulnerable and also significant for the global discourse of sustainable in terms of both space and time, because Northeast India is located, these communities are located in an area which has a concentration of high diverse biocultural diversity, natural resources. It is extremely it is, and in terms of time, in terms of the global era where we are all the entire humanity is placed in the human civilization era. Northeast India houses some of the most unique ways of living, which people in the rest of the world has probably forgotten to live sustainably, and we find practices of that still there prevalent in the seed form in Northeast India. So from both in terms of vulnerability, because it can be destroyed very easily, but also in terms of its own invaluability, in terms of what can be adopted from Northeast India and brought when the rest of the world is trying to learn to live sustainably. That becomes very important. This sprawling region is conspicuous with verdant hilly terrains of Eastern Himalayas, scenic natural beauty, hospitable people with enduring expression in art and culture, quaint historic and Indo-Vedic religious shrines, habitats of endangered species. However, in spite of this whole plethora and invaluable resource module, it is unfortunate that in spite of this abysmal wealth of resources, the region has earned a reputation of conflict, insurgency, infrastructural and democratic deficit, rather than a kind of an acclamation for its unique biocultural archive. And this is one of the reasons why we need to bring Northeast India into the discourse of global discourse of sustainability and the public policy planning that has gone. The reason why it is so entrenched and conflict trodden is because of the mistakes that were made in trying to implement public policy in this region, in the way development planning was implemented in this region. And so a very important concern is to see how to utilize and develop the region's resources in a diversified and balanced manner through a viable development model of sustainability. How can localism be negotiated with a global vision? The concerns are also how can globalization and technological growth be optimized without endangering indigenous habitat, tradition, culture. And these are some of the questions which are common to most of the regions of the world, especially those regions which are going through this. So while it is necessary to expose Northeast India to global discourses, initiatives and experiences of models implemented in the West, for example the natural capital model itself, I will get into this, the danger of letting neoliberalism models to get into conservation of in the northeast and areas such as Northeast India. It is also equally vital to allow the outside world. In fact, it is equally or more important to allow the outside world a glimpse into the historical and traditional nature of sustainable living in the Northeast India through indigenous knowledge, local resource management and distribution, community assets, community common property resources, all these institutions which have survived in this region. In fact, they need to understand that. Emerging marginalized economies like Northeast India is not unique, rich with exploited natural resources and abundant biocultural wealth make them extremely vulnerable as well as significant. India's post-colonial policy planning, incongruencies in natural resource has led to the creation of a volatile culture of ethnic violence when indigenous rights clashed with sentiments of pan-nationalism with respect to resource mobilization. So for India, since this is Northeast is a site of post-development policy making, and India's nationalism sees Northeast as one of its assets where India can exercise its pan-national post-development agenda. However, the local indigenous communities who live in the local community, who have lived and who have saved or who have sustainably lived their lives so that this huge bulk of resources could be sustainably have continued till today. They also have indigenous rights on that, and sentiments are bound to clash if they are not handled with care. Now, the choice of neoliberal paradigm and the problems of bringing neoliberal paradigm into areas of into areas such as neoliberalism, into areas such as Northeast India. Now, what are the problems of having a perspective of natural capitalism and having a perspective of neoliberalism, and staying within the neoliberalism paradigm for Northeast India? Neoliberalism is by far reaching ideologues are so deeply embedded in our society that to go is not a thing. Even where challenges are confronted, solutions are also sought, as always, from within the free market economy. Practices like carbon trading that grants nations and corporates. I'm going to talk about both because it is relevant for both corporates as well as nations also. So when choices practices like carbon trading is implemented, that litigation for reducing green gas emission, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and private companies' permission to sell their right to pollute other companies have shown the futility of looking for reduction of carbon emissions by creating a carbon market. The problem of neoliberalism and its efforts of creating a carbon market is that neither does the companies feel like they would just buy off their offset permits and buy off their pollution rights in order to pollute one part of the in order to legitimize their pollution tactics. Now this kind of an approach has proved to be extremely disastrous because practices like carbon trading and cap and trade also they make commoditization of pollution so detrimental that instead of moving anywhere forward in terms of reducing emissions or clean development mechanisms, and in terms of moving anywhere forward, we actually moved 100 steps backwards. In fact, from the developing nations' point of view, cap and trade regulation, which was initiated to combat climate change and pollution, by commoditizing pollution has created a greater problem than was foreseen by the companies. Now in reality get to choose between reducing their own emissions or buying offset permits. So what do they do? These companies which are based in some other parts of the world, they buy off carbon offset permits in some other part of the world. So they buy that and they invest in some so-called natural resource, maybe dam building, or they invest in those parts of the thing, and they shed off their responsibility of carbon of reducing emissions in other parts where they are based. So this kind of, as I was mentioning earlier, this restitutive kind of a judicial system, restitutive to bring back status quo can be problematic to a large extent. Offset permits enables companies to exceed their emission cap by paying for supposed pollution reductions to take place elsewhere, outside the capped market, typically in the so-called third world countries. Cap and trade schemes allow offset credits to be traded in lieu of actual emission trades. Offset permits, which are typically cheaper and less regulated than actual emission trades, allow polluters in this case can be either companies or even nations, to continue business as usual, and delaying the significant infrastructural changes that is required to shift to a low carbon economy. So, in fact, this is very, very visible in Northeast India, and consequences of financial incentives through the clean development mechanism. Okay, this is also another, and this is also another scheme which was developed by the developed world in order to clean up, and it has been implemented in Northeast India also, where there has been an increasing trend of dam development patronized by the government to check carbon credits from the clean development mechanism of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The United Nations Framework on Climate Change gives this option, to create these clean development mechanisms to companies and to nations in different. And Northeast India has been one of the one of the locations where clean development mechanisms have been implemented by the outside countries. And lured by the incentives, a large number of hydropower projects have been pursued by both public and private company bodies, such as NHPCs and Athena Power. These are private limited companies, Lancos, and to name a few. Public concerns in this area has been growing because these companies have just started these dam development thing, thinking that large scale dam building can mitigate large dam building, can mitigate false claims of dam building companies that dams can contribute to the mitigation of climate change. So particularly focusing on dams which are seeking carbon credits. So they were seeking carbon credits. The option was that they went and constructed those dams, took up these projects to construct the dam. Not only hydropower, large-scale projects, but also projects such as oil and gas exploration projects. Can you imagine them being, contributing to climate change and having low carbon, contributing to low carbon economy? And even intensely environmentally extractive cement projects seek carbon credits here in Northeast. So the cement industry get concentrated into this. When market theory postulates that wealth is created when private property rights and prices are assigned to resources, it often has trouble respecting the actual value of inalienable resources that are so important for human well-being and planetary sustenance. So this is the problem. This is the problem of staying within the neoliberalism. Now, this brings us to the other option. What is the other option? The other option is, as we were discussing, the commons paradigm. And David Bollier's book, The Wealth of the Nation, World Beyond Market and State, although it seems some kind of an epistemological anachronism from the Western capitalist point of view, particularly the developed nations with a political cultural legacy, to regard collective management of any kind to be highly problematic and compromise with individual freedom. The Western capitalist and mechanistic model of capitalism can never look at property as anything but individual, that there is a possibility of creating a common property resource, common property where a number of heads can come together and avail advantages, and is something which is completely beyond the Western capitalist point of view. The paradigm of commons fills a theoretical void by explaining how significant value can be created and sustained outside the market system. The commons paradigm does not look to system of property, contracts, and markets, but to social norms and rules and to legal mechanisms that enable people to share ownership and control of resources. The matrix for evaluating public good is not the narrow economic gross domestic product or the GDP or the company's bottom line, but the company's bottom line, but instead a richer, more qualitative, humanistic set of criteria that are not easily measured, such as moral legitimacy, social consensus and equity, transparency in decision making, and ecological sustainability. This is what they. Some of the modern examples of commons paradigm can be seen, something as giving example, something as an econ pot, which manages a large economic literature for its users community, and conservation commons, which build a global public domain for literature about the environment and conservation, which anyone can access. Now, sustainable and actual concretization of this working principle of common has been present in the Northeast India as a traditionally dominant local worldview of indigenous communities. The most effective means the demographic in the most effective way, the demographic composition of Northeast India and the legacy of the tribal worldview of sustainable natural resource management through its customary laws. They have customary laws which is localized, common property resources where everyone has an access to the property as in a common property and can access and take the advantage and shelter of all resources, and they have rights to them. And local councils for traditional governance are powerful institutional structure to drive decision making and implementations. Once augmented by modern institutional forms such as rationalization, technology, human rights, and freedom of expression, these societies can become the epitome of human civilization. Now, we have seen that just as there were certain loopholes in staying within the neoliberal, staying within the neoliberal paradigm. Similarly, the commons paradigm can also have certain. When we see it in the ground level of northeastern region, we see there can be some uh, problems too. However, we also have to understand that common property resources. I would like to quote this because I would like to quote this here so that I do not miss out on anything. Now, the customary laws which operates within the tribes are extremely dominant and also sometimes extremely severe in terms of its implementation. Now, the dominance of customary law largely marginalizes individual consciousness completely in every event or sphere of social activity. However, with reference to natural resource management, it provides solutions to three significant challenges that plague modern capitalist institutions. Firstly, resource sharing and redistribution. Common property resources addresses the issue of equity, both intergenerational, intragenerational, and gender. And secondly, environmental degradation and conservation. Customary laws and local councils monitor shared responsibility and adjudication against misconduct or violation of norms. For example, the sacred groves like in Meghalaya or community forest, common among indigenous communities in the Northeast India, fulfill many critical ecosystem functions such as providing seed banks for local species, providing habitat and recruitment areas for seed dispersing animals, and providing habitat for predators on local agricultural pets. Social taboos such as specific food taboos, harvesting method taboo. There are certain times when one cannot enter these sacred groves at all. And so there are timings when it can be done, harvesting method taboos, taboos against harvesting in certain seasons or under certain conditions, and the like may also have the effect of contributing to resource sustainability, although they may not have specific conservation origins. It was not thought to have any conservation origins, but the fact that they are deterred from doing certain activities at certain point of time make sure that makes some kind of an some kind of norm and sustainable distribution among a possibility in these tribes. Some tribes have complete community based ownership, and others combine individual with clan ownership. Among the former are the Aka, who lacked the very concept of individual ownership till recently and only had usufructuary rights. That means whenever whoever is using it has a right on that particular property. When it comes to land ownership, each family cultivated as much land as it is needed in the June season, after which it is reverted to the community. However, a family could use wetlands on the bank of the river for settled agriculture, but it continued to belong to the village. Among the latter, Angamis of Nagaland and the Dimasas of Assam, who combined community with individual ownership. The Garos of Meghalaya made a distinction between the regular residents of a village and stranger. The regular residents could cultivate as much land as they needed, but the latter or the strangers who came into their thing required the nokma or the chief heiress permission and had to pay a tax. This is a matrilineal society. In theory, land remained with the owner lineage, but was in practice with an individual family as long as it cultivated. Traditionally, the Karbi villages did not have a fixed boundary or name since they kept shifting. Communal ownership was a norm among them. The Bodo followed the Ahom custom of allotting 3 paras of land to each family in return for free labor for about a third of the year. Now, what I'm mentioning out here are this entire system has undergone a number of changes, it has evolved and merged more and more, has become more and more closer to the modern capitalist structure. And obviously, and in assimilating with the mainstream India, most of these traditional institutions have been marginalized and have taken peripheral shapes. So the problem, however, here, when we take a holistic understanding of what kind of public policy can take place, maybe an amalgamation of both is a possibility. Exploring possibilities of achieving prosperity, human development, security, stability, and well-being by creating economic and social wealth. So while the neoliberalism paradigm can contribute to creating creating affluence and wealth to a large extent, create scientific rationality, bringing them into the and augmenting the demographic composition of Northeastern, the legacy of the tribal worldview of sustainable resource management, their customary laws, common property resource, local councils for traditional governments are powerful institutional structures to drive decision making and implementation. In this point, I should also mention the very important area of the role of women. Traditional structures, and especially in the political, especially in the area of customary laws and the local councils of traditional governments, do not pay or give much importance to women's rights, or women is not a very democratic form of governance. And in this sense, modern structures of democratic governance, modern structures of scientific rationality and free thinking and individual freedom can come to would be of value to these societies in that sense. Once augmented by modern institutional forms such as rationalization, technological growth, human rights, and freedom of expression, these societies can become the epitome of human civilization as is most in its most elevated state. Thank you very much. I think I've overshot my time miserably, and Dr. Rajesh, I'm extremely sorry about that. And Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to carry this discussion uh, to this level. Uh, uh, Miserably short over time, but I guess you can say that sometimes my academic thing takes over my deadlines, as we are used to in IGNOU. So thank you
May
very
not
much.
be so, madam. It was a pleasure listening to you and the kind of inputs that you are giving. We were all listening very carefully to each and every aspect that you are explaining. And many of these aspects have a practical implication on issues related to sustainable development as such. So, yeah, you haven't overshot the time. Frankly speaking, we would have been disappointed if you hadn't taken us through all these very important aspects as well. In fact, the kind of interest that you have generated among our learners can be seen in the types of questions also which have come up, which I'll be displaying on the screen, and you can take them on one by one. However, before that, I think we have to listen to our co-panelists also, their views, observations, as well as the questions that they have. So, Jaljakumari ma'am, we would like to start with you, ma'am.
Once again, thanks, sir. I was keenly listening. A lot of information. It's also a throat problem of climate change. Sorry for that. A lot of information means highly informative, thought provoking. I don't know how much I have written in my book. That much points were there. And everything was related to the key points which have been mentioned in the topic. So that itself, the topic titled as a lot of operational definitions, I think. Madam has given clear definitions, clear clarification, clear descriptions on each and every point. I noticed almost 20, 30 points. And for asking question, only one thing I am highlighting, but the most beautiful things, this natural economy and the harvest festivals. I think a very nice thing as an educationist. We can have that opportunity. We can implement that opportunity in school level onwards. Instead of nowadays, the modern generation, modern youngsters, they are very much interested in DJ parties, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And where all the spiritualities, culturalism, all the values, everything is going on also. So this is the one of the best point I have noticed to bring them back with a mind of sustainability to contribute. Otherwise, Madam was also telling that this environmentalism, you were defining it clearly that what not to do. This is we are always highlighting in environmentalism. But what to do? What possibilities are there to do? That has to be highlighted. In that point of view, this harvest festival is very nice. And considering the southernmost part of India, Kerala, I think the new generation is going back, going away, not going back, going away from agricultural matters. Agriculture itself is a culture of agri life. But nobody is listening agriculture as a cultural factor. But I think still in the northeast part of India is following and they are doing a lot and they are keeping abreast the values of that things without disturbing the vulnerable nature. Isn't it, ma'am? And only one point I am asking you that if everywhere there is public private partnership is there, especially in sustainable development also, government is also giving, most of the governments are giving that duty to some corporates or with some organizations. Uh, Ma'am, do you think that this public participation uh, or the measures of clean development mechanism in which private participation is there, can promote economic naturalism without compromising the economic natural economy. Can you please, what do you think about it? I don't have that positive mind because I'm thinking that after covering a stage, people will be thinking about more profit, and that will again become a business which harms the sustainability of the. Isn't it not?
Yes, yes. Ma'am, of course, in fact, what I was talking was absolutely in line, aligning to what you have just said. In fact, Northeast is one location which is a concretization of where failure of CDM has happened, because as I was talking about, buying commoditization of pollution and buying carbon trading and creating a carbon market, and then wanting to. So how do you think that has happened? The companies and the nations who are based in some other part of the world, they want to clean their dirt, so they buy some offsets, and then they want to invest in the big dam projects in Northeast. Now big dam projects, what is going to happen? Big dam project is a top down approach, because the people, the communities who were going to live in those big dams will never work. It will totally, it will totally devastate communities and regions and everything, and all those communities who are living in the banks of those rivers will just get totally and this is of course, Narmada Bachao and all that have been fighting for a long time about it. And again, we are thinking of big dams which will totally take off communities from there. Now the question is, very difficult to answer at this time. So do we, as I was saying, so do we not have dams at all, or do we, or will Northeast get in terms of it benefits when these public and private partnerships take place? Will they not? So it has to be done in a very systematic and slow manner, where you have adequate data. People centric data is available of what they want, whether they are ready to move on to a different kind of profession and leave their places, and where do they go, how do you rehabilitate these people, whether they are ready for that or not. It can never be a top down private public partnership. It will never work. It has to be always, and we are all growing we are realizing the value of low scale. We are realizing the value of low scale. We are realizing the value of locals, local decision making. We are realizing the value of local resources. So in that sense, entirely our development planning will have to see from a grassroots and a bottom up approach, what they want and to what extent they can think. A public private approach of, from a top down thing will never work for any, and it has never worked for any part of the world also. As you were saying, I'm sorry, I'm also taking this. Why are people moving, or why is the next generation moving away from agriculture? What you just said, one of the fundamental, in fact this is one of the things that I have spoken as a fundamental reason for conflict in Northeast also. Because when you take away the source of self-esteem, what are these agrarian, these are all agrarian communities, the fundamental knowledge system which is available to them, which gives them self-esteem, which gives them a heritage, a legacy, whatever the legacy is, agriculture. These are agricultural communities. Now when you marginalize agriculture, what happens is they lose their grounding completely. They become, they, as Marx says, the lumpen proletariats moving from the village to the city. And when you go to the city, the craft, the traditional craft that you had, the only source of self-esteem that was yours, does not meet anything anymore. You are expected to become something else. You are expected to become a computer, a data entry worker. I mean, this is almost, when you look at it, it almost sounds ridiculous. Why should someone, the young people of the, why should they be forced to move out of their communities and go for a profession which they are not good at or they don't know anything at all. It happened because of the mechanistic capitalistic model, the colonial capitalism that we have been part of. And it is always possible that we rectify it and do corrections. I'm not saying everybody starts becoming a farmer again. When you talk about something like this, why don't you be, are you saying that everyone should go back and become a farmer? And so what is the problem of becoming a farmer? There are so many people who are professional farmers. What is the problem of making farming a profession, which is a number of the western states have see farmers have professional degrees. They have professional degrees there. So why can't we, these are small, this like never ending kind of a discourse. And especially Kerala and Northeast have so much in common. There's a lot of things in common. It's just that Northeast have come to the middle. If you see in a scale of 1 to thing, Northeast has come to 50, Kerala has gone to 80. But then Kerala will have to make a revert, because again we are realizing the problems of over literacy, problems of de-agriculturalizing. We are realizing all these things happening again. It's a cycle basically.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
I don't know.
I think
I don't know
I
how to answer.
that, yeah, that is, I think that was a very good answer, Madam Jalja ma'am. Any further rejoinder on that?
No, ma'am. No, sir. It's quite absolutely, madam is telling the
Yes,
answer, and this self-esteem is the biggest, the key point in that. Correct.
exactly. That's true. Sindhu ma'am, would you like to join and give your comments and questions, please? Sindhu ma'am, you are online. Okay, Prasida ma'am. Sindhu ma'am, please join. Okay, please, Sindhu ma'am, you are online. You are visible on the screen, but I think your connectivity is a bit dodgy. Okay, Prasida, nice to have you on the program, and please ask your question or make your comment, please.
So thank you, sir. First of all, let me apologize, sir. I couldn't join at that point of time. I'm really sorry, sir. But whatever I could hear about Madam's lecture, it was extremely, like Jalja ma'am said, that it's a very gripping, I must say, because the points which she was raising was so gripping that we had to really understand each and every line of what she was saying. So, ma'am, just because you put your thought about that we need to go from a bottom-up approach. That's what you said, ma'am. Bottom-up approach.
Yes.
Just like I wanted to highlight is we have something called slum tourism in Dharavi. Slum tourism in Dharavi. It's a very
Right.
novel approach which they are following to enhance the tourism. And something in Northeast has such an indigenous and vibrant culture and traditions. So some sort of novel approach, similar to that, something needs to be created so that the indigenous culture is tapped and the indigenous resources are also tapped in a proper way. Because, ma'am, you highlighted how the neoliberalism paradigm, and also you talked about the commons paradigm. And lastly, you spoke that it needs to be a sustainable liberation, ma'am. So I would just like to know what your comments on all these issues are, ma'am. Just
Yes, I I would really like to emphasize on what you. I'm so glad you've actually summed it up and said what I wanted to communicate, and I'm glad that I was I communicated what I wanted to say. So thank you for very much for that. The actually, from my understanding, my experience of what I've seen, there is no other way but a bottom up approach. Because whether we talk about a society, whether we talk about a community, a nation, or a self, and we talk about our own self, everything, the solution always lies within, inside. So when we talk of talking for some kind of a paradigm, for some kind of a, policy for any particular community, the solutions will have to come from the community themselves. Just a solution for us also has to come from ourselves. Nobody can make a solution for us. We have to choose to make our own solution. Communities will also have to choose what they want as a solution. And in that sense, this whole one has to connect this bottom up approach with localization also, because, and also scaling it down. So when we talk about, you know starvation, deaths, or hunger, no community or no society ever goes hungry. No person can ever go hungry within a social fold. Hunger is always created through some kind of a capitalistic hullabaloo, right? Kind of a, and we have seen from all over, these problems have always been dealt with by communities as all. I can say from my work in the Northeast that there is nothing called starvation death in the Northeast societies or in the communities as such. Now, I would also like to make a mention out here that when I speak of Northeast now, it Northeast looks very different now. If you go to Guwahati, if you go to place, they look like dazzling Mumbai, maybe. They look different. But I'm talking. This is also to say that the when this has happened, there are a number of communities, and these communities are also in the process of getting into this kind of a development model. But there is no problem in their getting into the development model, as long as they do not shed off their own traditional legacy completely, and as long as we do not put and we do not give it some kind of a a pointer to say that the traditions that they have, the values of sustainable living that these communities had is valuable, they will try to move away from those and get into something else totally. So even what you have just said about the Dharavi thing, you, it is it's very important, and Northeast is doing a lot of their efforts are to create their communities, rebuild their communities, preserve their traditional values and traditional practices and everything. There is a lot of things, but my point is, if from outside we do not accept them or allow them as valuable to the mainstream society, those things will just fall off, and again the neoliberal paradigm will take over as the rest of the world has been taken over. So there has to be a coming together in terms of first understanding what does Northeast, what does the tribe, what does the communities need, and also to see and value that these communities have something which are extremely valuable, and they can act as a learner, or they can act as a subject of learning for the wider society, which who has forgotten to live sustainably. So nobody is doing anyone a favor. It is time for the outside world to appreciate what needs to be appreciated, because we better appreciate, because we are hitting we are hitting the limit very soon, and we won't know what to do.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was very elaborate and very interesting also. Sindhu ma'am, would you like to come on? Yeah, please.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Good morning, sir, and madam, and all my colleagues. I think this was a session of a very different nature, which because it was at a very different level, I felt. Madam, it was very learned presentation, and the entire title itself was different in the sense that deconstructing sustainability, because that is what we are trying to do at every dimension of sustainability, be it in our course as well. In fact, we could get a good glimpse of the activities, and Northeast, as far as people like me are concerned, we have never been to that side, apart from knowing what that it is there. So your presentation was a very learned presentation, and the point that you mentioned finally, sustainable liberalism, That's a very beautiful concept. I don't have a question as such to ask, but I felt that that is a very beautiful concept to take inputs from in whichever society or wherever we are. Maybe it's in the Kerala context or in a place like Northeast or any other place. So that is very beautiful concept that you had placed in the session for us. Thank you very much, ma'am, sir. That's all from my side. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
Thank,
much.
thank you, ma'am. But before we go on to the questions raised by our students, I have a personal doubt. That is, across Northeast, these six sister states, you have a large number of tribes, large number of indigenous communities, so on and so forth. Now, each of these communities, or most of them, would be having different concepts pertaining to the management and use of common property resources. Now, nature as such is indivisible, but these community rules are divisible and they are different also. And given that, has it resulted in resource conflicts of any kind? And has it actually affected the process of common property utilization in the Northeast?
Absolutely. Like, you're so correct. Firstly, each of these communities are a nation by itself. They are a nation by itself because they have their own, they have their own customary laws. They have their own laws about governance. They have their own property thing. Every natural resource management, they were all nations by themselves. And hence, now what has happened is, many a times whatever you hear about conflicts in Northeast are, they look like conflicts about something else, but actually they are conflicts about locally who manages the resource and who has an access to those resources, and how wrongly the resources have been managed. Now the third party who has come into it, as a third party stakeholder who's come into it, is the government of India. Now, because India's pan nationalism also sees this as a region of India's post-colonial post-development planning, so obviously, so you have another stakeholder who has joined the thing. So the conflict is enormous. Now the problem here, and what you're saying, just going with the as a horse with a blinker, and saying that the common property resource and these institutions that these societies have are all very good and we should go for that, that also has a big problem. Because this, as I said, they are so individualist, they are not, sorry, they are so communalistic, that the individual has no role in it at all. There is no scope of individual opinion, individual rights, individual things. So the society says, from today, this person is out of the society. So the society, it's the same scenario as thing. Women at the same time enjoy, it looks apparently, and it was a misnomer which said that women in the matriarchal societies have a very high status, and we know now, after a lot of and Kerala included in that, of course, and we know now after a lot of research that actually that's not the case, because most of the time women actually have no say in the matter at all. And even in terms of they're most of the time, even in Northeast, among the Khasis, and they're basically custodians of those properties. And then the mother's brother is very, very important. So it's like saying, you have, it's like how we do as an RD sometimes. You have all your all your sanctions and everything, but then you'll have to wait for the final approval. Till then there is nothing to be said. So the final approval will have to come from the mother's brother, and then after that, that person can take some kind of a thing and liberty of that thing. So it is definitely going to create a lot of problem in case if you leave them at their own kind of thing. And hence I said sustainable liberalism, because there is a need to bring in the wider paradigm of rationality, of individual freedom, of everything that modernity brought to us. Those values are also equally very important, so that has to be brought. But at the same time, let's not do away with the lesson of sustainable living that these communities bring for us, because we are forgetting how to live sustainably in our societies in this thing. That's, I don't know if if I could answer your
In
there's no,
fact, that is in fact one of the best answers you can give. because there is no hard and fast rule with regard to such issues. It has to be practically dealt with at the level.
It is.
So definitely.
Yes.
And now we will take the questions from the students. So I am going to display them on the screen. So yeah, Kavimani, he's asking this question: how the SDGs play a role to retain a safe operating space for a humanity for future use?
Do I answer like this here only, or I have to write it down? Okay.
No.
Yes.
Just answer verbally.
So the sustainability development goals are, of course, it's like saying, when we talk about sustainability, it's a universe so broad, and it covers so many disciplines and areas that when you talk of sustainability, it is a very confusing thing. So sustainable development goals were created in order to streamline some of these areas and bring them into different certain specific areas, which becomes, so that it becomes easier for us to focus on, by the United Nations. Now, through that, definitely, if you see the safe operating, let me see, if you see the safe operating,
You want the slide, man?
yeah, yeah, can you just put the slide?
Yeah, I have put the slide. It is visible now.
Okay, so if you see the safe operating zone, and you see the different areas which have been demarcated in this zone, we have to see whether, in fact, SDG covers a lot more than this. And the ones which are here, if you see the kind of areas that they have covered out here, they have covered climate change, ocean acidification, they have covered these wider areas out here, land system change, biodiversity loss. These are broader areas. But if you see SDG are much more minute focused questions in SDG, which can be fit into all these areas. So, and the most of the time, uh, how SDG play a role to retain. Yes, of definitely SDG plays, because once you abide and once you try to implement SDG in the proper manner, all these are going to be addressed. If they are addressed, then obviously safe operating space for humanity for the future use, we will expect that the reds will become more less. That is the purpose of the SDG, to reduce these, and to increase the safe operating zone and to reduce the red areas that are out here. And of course, SDG has a very important role to play with the specific areas that they address, because they
Thank you.
address everything. Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead. No problem.
No, I said yes, and SDG addresses almost everything, and when we address all these aspects which are more wider thing, they will anyway get reduced. I hope so, at least.
We have a question from Neetu Vineet. To what extent does the liberal market economy approach exacerbate inequalities in access to ecosystem resources and benefits?
To a large extent, because the mechanistic capitalist model is, that's what we were saying, it is made in such a way that it violates the very structures on which it is based. What is capitalism without people, and what is capitalism without nature? Nature is the main resource, people are the main resource, and they violate that randomly. So if it is violated so randomly, obviously it will increase inequalities. It is one of the most fundamental outcomes of of liberal market economy. The more liberal market economy gets into gets permeates into society, the more inequalities is bound to occur, and inequalities will then take different levels, like inequalities between rich nation, poor nation, rich community, poor community, within the richer nations, and then within the communities you have further, and then it goes within. So it's differences at all level. And ultimately, even those levelizers like technology, which was seen as the primary levelizer of inequality, even that will become a source of inequality, as we are facing right now with digital divide. We can have as much as online education and online thing available, but unless we address digital device and connectivity issues, we are not really addressing any kind of thing.
Thank you, ma'am. Sajit has a question. How can ecosystem management strategies reconcile the often conflicting goals of environmental sustainability and economic profitability within a liberal market economy?
Goals of sustainability and economic profitability. In fact, that's what I was trying to say. Firstly, liberal market economy and pre-assumes conflict. The moment liberal market economy is the moment there is commoditization of anything. I've given the example of commoditization of something like as intrinsic as pollution. The moment you commoditize pollution, it takes a completely different thing together. And so there is ecosystem management strategies within liberal market economy will never be out of conflict. It will always create a conflict, and this management will not be possible. And that's the reason I was trying to bring out, when I was talking of the neoliberal paradigm, I was trying to say that it is not going to be possible to ever level out the conflicts that emerge as a result of liberal market, because you've already commoditized everything. The moment it is commoditized, there has to be a conflict of some sorts.
Yeah, I think there is a rejoinder to this question. He's asking us what trade-offs and synergies exist between the two objectives, and how can they be optimized to ensure the long-term health of ecosystems and the economy.
Okay, I think that's a very good question. In fact, I would like you to, even the students, to participate in this, because that's also, because as you know, this paper was this paper was something that was a developed paper, and I wrote that paper, and obviously that needs to grow. It cannot end there, and these additions are important. So if we take neoliberalism in one hand, and if we take commons paradigm on the other hand, the indigenous knowledge systems, their worldview on the other hand, and the worldview of the neoliberal capitalistic worldview on the other hand, how can they be optimized to ensure? Yes, and they can be optimized to ensure, as I was saying, there could be some more answers to it also. I'm not saying this is the last answer, but yes, the way I think Dr. Rajesh was also saying right now, and I was just telling you that yes, within the commons paradigm, there is a dearth of individual freedom. There's a dearth of individual rights and freedom of speech, freedom of ideas. The individualistic parameter is very reduced. And when you don't have voice of critic, when you don't have a democratic opinions and decision making power, it definitely suffers. So when these institutions which are, and we take from these institutions environmental sustainability, we take from this institution equity and resource sharing, we take from these institutions I think living close to nature and all, and then we bring from the other objective, we bring scientific rationality, ideas of freedom of thought, freedom of democratic democratic decision making. We take all that, and this is going to create the synergy between both of them, and if we want to have a perfect system to get it together. I mean, and this is my idea, but there could be other ways of looking at the synergies and trade-offs also, which I'll be interested in. Please share my email with all of them, and I'll be interested if anybody wants to write an email to me and give me an answer to this question also.
Sure. There is another question. How can ecosystem management policies be designed to ensure equitable distribution of ecological services and prevent the marginalization of vulnerable communities and future generations?
This is in a nutshell what sustainable liberalism is all about. See, ecosystem management, great, yes, can be designed to ensure equitable distribution of ecological services, which comes from the, which actually comes from equity and distribution of ecological. See, equitable distribution of ecological services. No, it cannot be equitable distribution of ecological, because ecological services are equitable. You do not breathe a different oxygen than me, and I do not avail a different soil nutrient than you do. But yes, inequity can be created, but where there is human intervention through capitalistic. So supposing you have a plot of land which you have conquered, I'm going into the colonial belt of it, and then you push in a lot of chemical fertilizer into it, and then you say that yes, then it is inequitable because some part of the country has a better soil quality and we have a worse soil quality. Ecologically speaking, when they're left to their own, there is no inequity in that. All of us breathe the same air, free air. That's all. But so I have a problem with equitable distribution of ecological services. Ecological services are most definitely equitable anyway. We do not have to ensure it by anything unless there is human intervention or there is a intervention of capitalistic endeavor or whatever, and prevent marginalization of vulnerable. No, they do not create marginalization of vulnerable communities at all. The equitable distribution of ecological services is a problem. I think you'll have to refine this, because there is no way that there can be an inequitable distribution of ecological services in the first place. And the people from Kerala do not inhale more oxygen than the people who live in northeast or people who live in Kolkata. We all have the same thing given to us, so there is no marginalization which is created by ecological services. So please change that, make that correction. So who has Neetu, Vineet, need to correct that.
Yeah, I think she's basically referring to the difference in quality of ecological services. That's what I can make out. Maybe.
Ensure
Only-
equitable distribution of
yeah.
ensure quality distribute quality of okay, I can take it like that. If you mean quality of ecological, to improve quality of ecological service and prevent marginalization of vulnerable communities, how can ecosystem management policies be designed? So if we take that as you said, as equal distribution of ecological services, is that it, Dr. Rajesh? Are you
I am
saying?
not sure because that's my interpretation. Like when I read through it, that's the thing that came to my mind.
So
Because
if
I have no way of interacting with the person who has put the question, because
Okay.
it's on the chat. That's the thing.
So I think my answer would be, if it is equal distribution of ecological services and marginalize that everyone receives the same thing, and there is no marginalization, and how do we manage our resources? My answer would be, of course, sustainable liberalism, where I tried to bring in both together, and that this is the main way that I feel ecosystem management can be thing, because ecosystem management will need democracy, democratic decision making, as well as as well as
Yes.
environmental sustainability and the unique patterns also.
Yes. Uh, I, there is one question from Charles Ekuban. Please, to what extent has over literacy affected ecosystems in Kerala?
Yes, in in fact, it's amazing that we're talking of over literacy now. I didn't even know that there is something called over literacy. But I guess, and coming back to Jalja madam, I mean, it's again, we're coming back to this, that yes, even literacy can become a problem. Literacy can become a problem when it is not, when we are sometimes, that is the problem of a Western centric capitalist model. We in the process of making the reaching the end, we forget the means that we are taking. So the ends are never justified by the means that we are taking. And so when we wanted 100% literacy anywhere, what were the parameters that literacy was supposed to achieve? What was literacy supposed to achieve? Literacy was supposed to achieve health. Literacy was supposed to achieve employment. Literacy was supposed to achieve well-being. So all that. So now that we say over literacy, does it mean that literacy has started ticking off some of these parameters, and instead of that there have been other there are other repercussions or after effects coming up which was not apprehended in the first thing? We had not envisioned, I will not say envisioned, we had not taken that into account when we were making our parameters, when we said the success of literacy will be measured if these are fulfilled, A, B, C, D. But we did not say that, we did not take into account some of the unseen consequences that usually happen. Sometimes we don't see consequences that happen, and I think that's exactly what has happened in Kerala's over literacy, so-called over literacy. Because now and if whether that has affected over literacy has affected ecosystems in Kerala, uh, this is a very interesting question, and in fact I would like to think about it. And even Dr. Rajesh, I mean, you're also madam, you also, because yes, have they, when we talk of ecosystem, we are having, Dr. Rajesh, we are having a lot of innovations, you remember, who are coming from Kerala. I mean, we have attended some of these some of these training programs where there was a presentation by someone from Kerala on how the ecosystem services, or how nature, and she had taken a particular area there and she had made a study on how the pollution level and all that of that area. And I think it was a design thingy, but I don't know. But when I was listening to her, and now this comes to my mind in that sense, there's a number of people who were the students. She had taken a number of people from her institute, and she said, I told them to go and study in these areas, and they made a study in those areas. And some of them they came, some of them they, I'm not able to think about it right now, but I'm sorry. Please excuse me. I just went into that thing thinking about. Let me come back to this and just start thinking whether being too educated can create ecosystem damages or not. If one is educated, one is expected to be sensitive, one is expected to be also aware. And when you are aware of yourself and your own environment around you, and it need not become ecosystem services, it can just be the environment where you are, in terms of cleanliness, in terms of in terms of in terms of health, in terms of the place that you are living in, hygiene and sanitization, all that. No, please, uh, sanitization, I'm sorry, this is in the, so what happens is you are expected to become more aware and more conscious about your environment and also about yourself. That is what true education as a definition should be. And when you become aware and sensitive to yourself, to your immediate environment, to your community, to your nation, and it goes on from your nation, you get into the planet, and so you are a educated person, and that should be the meaning of education. Because you then start thinking in terms of their, not only your well-being, the well-being of your immediate community, the well-being of your your family, the well-being of your nation, well-being of your planet. Everything starts growing like that. So if we have achieved our objective of education to create sensitive and aware human beings, then over literacy can never affect ecosystems in Kerala, because that individual start looking at the ecosystem through his connection to the ecosystem. It is a connectedness that becomes most important. He cannot exist without his connection with his, either you talk about his family or you talk about his community, and immediately you talk about his locality. He cannot exist as a human. The education that he was given cannot be operated anywhere else unless we think of education in universal and connectedness terms. So if we have achieved that, then over education can never be creating any kind of thing. But if we have not achieved that, that will be left to people, to Kerala, and I have not studied Kerala in that details. Then there is a possibility that one will take very short-sighted, fragmented, and fractured decisions, and those decisions will ultimately affect not only himself but also his community, his family, and of course his ecosystem, his planet, everything. It is a kind of a roundabout, it is a spiral action that education generates.
Yeah, what you said is very right, ma'am, and I fully endorse that. One of the practical difficulties that the society in Kerala is facing right now is that the more you get educated, there is a kind of alienation from the local communities and also from the land. Basically, earlier you would have thought that people will go become educated, they will come back and do better agriculture, for instance, and make a sustainable development possible. But what is happening is the reverse right now. People are moving away from the land. They are no longer getting interested in agriculture. Of course, many of the new generation boys and girls, they are coming back to agriculture. But in the middle period, the generation like which is typically depicted by people like me,
Yes,
they away more and more away from the land, and the ecosystem management was never a concern for them, and the negative effects are now being felt by the society at large. And not only that, you can also see that in the kind of labor scenario in Kerala right now, the kind of mass immigration into Kerala. The kind of course, many of the Keralites have migrated out
yes,
for a
that's
substantial
right.
long period of time into the Gulf, into other states in India, and so on. But what is happening right now is reverse migration. The number of people who have gone out, I think twice or thrice that number, people are coming in from other states. I
Yes,
don't. The impact of that has to be studied. And in a nutshell, what we feel at this point is that the divorce of the Keralite from the land and the commons, that the association which was so strong in earlier times, that has resulted in a lot of problems, and I feel that has to be addressed, and more research has to be conducted on that as well, without which the issue of quote unquote over literacy can never be addressed. Literacy and
absolutely.
education, in fact, have to feed into the development process rather than in the sustainable development process rather than be divorced from that. that unfortunately I feel is a failure of the education system in Kerala as such.
I think
Sir,
it's a
can I
failure
tell you?
of. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
No, ma'am. You
I
can
just
continue.
wanted to say, I think as you said, it is our generation, because I think there has been it is a failure not of Kerala's education system, but it's a general failure of education system, that the kind of education that we had actually did not. And you are again saying what I was saying: awareness and sensitivity and connection. The connection with land was broken, connection with our own selves were broken. I don't know what meritocracy we were taught, and with what use that meritocracy came when we were not able to handle our own lives properly, and those kind of things. So education as a whole, in the earlier thing, has, I think, has been very very detrimental in terms, if you see it in terms of growing, and so growing as a whole person. So ecosystem is part of the same thing, right? So it will anyway fail, and it has happened anywhere that way.
That's right.
All the more reason for us to, you know, bring our next generation to this understanding. I read a little a thing of Sadhguru somewhere, and I personally I listen to some of his things sometimes, and I read it somewhere, and he said, if you're unsuccessful and you make a long face, I can understand, but if you're successful and you make a long face and you're not happy, then I can't understand what do we have to say to our next generation, that if you achieve success, you're going to have a long face. So now you choose between success and unsuccess, and not being successful. So I thought at that point of time it made sense to me that maybe he's right. He's saying we need to understand whether we are really in the right path, we came really in the right path or not with success.
Exactly. Very true.
Sir, can I interfere a little bit?
Yeah, sure, ma'am, please.
I am completely agreeing with Rajesh sir also, but hopefully, I think there is a difference in the attitude of the people, common people in Kerala, because of the new Kerala model development bottom up. Because I have to tell you the Kudumbashri involvement in the developmental aspects of Kerala. This is really an example of bottom up development aspects, because than more than that of the educated people do for the society for sustainable development, the local ladies who doesn't have that much education but they are mere literates can do a lot with the help of the local self government. And now in Kerala, the implementation part of almost all developmental aspects of government policies are being done through the ladies who are involved in the self-help groups, which is the part of the Kudumbashri. And this becomes a worldwide development model and appreciated by UNESCO also. Madam knows it, being a sociologist. And where it is very much highlighted that education, literacy both are interrelated, and literacy is the prerequisite for education, further lifelong education. But that literacy rate of Kerala has given this opportunity for the people. And now the local uh, sector, the local organizations of women, means the home, uh, they are doing say, a lot of things in domestic matters. In my village, every month, ladies are coming, the Harida Karma Sena is there. They are coming to collect plastic waste from homes. And they have developed a QR code. They are sticking on the houses. If that sticker is not there on households, it is a punishable offense. It is considered like that from the part of government, and there is continuous checking and follow-ups are going on, and we have to pay rupees 50 for collecting that. From our part, we have to give 50 rupees for the collection of plastic waste. And at this stage, I have to tell you a happy thing that sometimes our liberal attitude and approach makes us to um, fire the whole matters. Means we will burn the whole waste together, and some plastic will be also there. And we are thinking, sometimes we may think that no problem, it's a little bit only, this time only. But on the way to home back, these ladies are seeing it, they will definitely find it out and they will report to Panchayat. So that policy strength or the strong attitude of the ladies to take part in the policy regulations and implementations, even though they are mere literates. That
Yes.
is also a very healthy thing. But instead, if we, the highly educated people, are going through the road, they won't fight. We won't fight. We won't interfere. We will think that it is not our matter. That development is a global model for model from the part of Kerala, and that is going up. They are interfering in all the matters, and now the Kerala women are highly environmentally literates, health-wise, hygienically literates. This is a very good green signal, I think, to be the model to Kerala. That is also there. So, for the knowledge of Charles Ekuban, this development is also currently going on. And, Madam, you and other people who are interested in sociological aspects can do some studies on this, and true data will be we can collect, and this will definitely do a mark of Kerala in global sustainability database. That is what I am thinking, and this information is also sharing with all the panelists and my dear students, along with Madam Sujata. Okay, ma'am.
Yes.
That's all.
Thank you so much. In fact, Kerala model is actually well appreciated, and Kerala model was really looked up. Even a few years back, Kerala's model of development has been very well applauded, and it was an exemplary model to be emulated. Yes, thank you so much for a reminder of this thing. I think ultimately, as you said, yes, the difference between, we will always have to make a difference between what education is and what literacy is, and only after that it is possible. And women, of course, that is a different topic. I just don't want to get into it because I have so much to talk about it, and I don't want to get about it. And yes, everywhere that you find this kind of a woman, uh, over literacy would probably never affect a woman in a wrong way, because ecosystem sensitivity is so much within her, the consciousness, that she wouldn't need literacy or anything else to impose that on her.
I think it has been a pretty long session. That's why I can understand the difficulty as well. It's almost 2.5 hours into the session. Are you okay, ma'am? You are on mute. Are you okay, ma'am?
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I just got a little.
Yeah, I know. We will take one last question and wind up the program for the day. This is again, I am in Kerala and the amount of externality is so high. So how can we help reduce this kind of practice?
What do you mean by externality? Do you mean incoming or inflows of
Maybe he is talking about the pollution and other things which are in Kerala right now. I think that is what I can make out, because externality basically means these kinds of environmental externalities in the context of Kerala. I am also pollution.
Is Kerala that polluted? I mean, is Kerala, because for
Pollution
those
is
of us
rising. Some, if you look at the kind of pollution that was in Kerala 10 years back, now what we have is almost double that rate. He's talking about pollution. He has mentioned that in the chat.
yeah, okay, he's
Yeah.
so I
So
think when you come from, when you live in Kolkata and you're talking about pollution in Kerala, because we look forward to a holiday in Kerala to take off our pollution. So I'm finding it a little difficult to understand what level of pollution he's talking about, Mr. Ekuban.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Rejoinder to that, throwing of rubbish indiscriminately.
yes, I know these things are so, and well, as I guess these things are so much of a personal decision, and the way we are brought up. I find it, even if I have to tear off something and throw it in my room, I find it very difficult to do it even then. And sometimes my assistants out here, you know, I'm I'm very particular, that I think all of us are for that matter. But I don't know why it happens only in India. Indians are famous for doing that. They will just take out a chilka from somewhere, throw it on the road, put it outside the car, or and the same person, when he goes abroad, he goes to Singapore, he will never do anything like that. He will be so conscious. He'll keep it all. He will never do something. So I don't know. It must be a kind of a lack of a community education system. Now in that case, all of us together. And Mr. Ikuban, my only the only thing that I can tell you now is, as individuals, as individuals, as community members, as professionals, and all this, we are all individuals who make choices at every moment. It is all our own choices. Every small thing, every small step that do what you are saying, we can only do talk for ourselves, and we can only make the choice for ourselves. It is so difficult, and I guess for that reason it is so difficult for a government to plan everything for us. And if we keep blaming the government is not doing this, the community worker is not doing this, it is so difficult, because we can't take responsibility of the way someone else is going to behave. So my uh, my request to you, or would be, as I do for myself, I take these choices in my own hand, and I try to do what I can do. Whatever I can do to keep my office room clean, and after that, maybe my own community clean, my own car clean, my own home, then after that, outside, make sure that I don't, and whoever else you try, you can only tell them, because you can only take responsibility of your own decisions and or your own choices. We cannot start complaining and throwing the onus on others, and say the government is working badly, the society is working badly, my office staff don't come and work from me. No, we have to do whatever we can. And if each one of us start thinking in this kind of a rippling effect, there will be a rippling effect, and that's how things get done. And next time, the next generation will also pick it up, and they will know that there is no other choice, this is the only way of life. So nobody will be so these kind of statements, like water pollution is really destroying freshwater ecosystem, they're like statements, they're like statements. We all know that this is it. But what do you do, or what do I do, so that we don't contribute to this pollution, and we do whatever is possible in our hand to not pollute, is something that we can do, I guess. That's all we it's possible. So even as I don't know if that pleases you, but that would be my answer to saying, because I cannot take up a whole project to say that we'll do something and clean up Kerala completely. The water pollution will be right, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And even if it happens, after some time, it will again go back to the same thing, because we haven't changed our mindset. And that individual will again, somebody else will come and pollute it afterwards. So that's how most projects fall off. So that's my that's my take. Thank
In
you so
fact,
much.
I in fact, I agree with Mr. Charles. If you look at the backwaters of Kerala, once upon a time it
I
used to be
know.
very pristine. there used to be hardly any pollution. People used to bathe in these backwaters. You could have had a lot of tourism out there. But now, if you look at many of these backwaters, you'll be astonished with the level of pollution that you have there, and that essentially goes on to show that the intermediate generation in which many of us fall, we have done everything to pollute these pristine ecosystem resources that we had. And now, and we have put the onus on the coming generations to solve these problems. If we had taken many of the right steps at the right moment, many of these things would not have happened. And yes, it all boils down to the mindset that you are talking about. And surely, I feel this is the right time when we can take many of these remedial measures. Maybe the time is even late, but still, if you try it out at this moment, maybe many of the things can be rectified. And maybe
As you
having
are
a
saying, sorry, as you are saying this, my heart is breaking, because backwaters of Kerala is such a, it's a wealth. Not only what y'all are fortunate that you live there, but it's a wealth which we think that one day we will be there in the backwaters and have, that's a dream. So please do everything that's possible to make sure that is the commons again. This is one of our commons wealth, and which is so important that each one of us should be sensitized to understand. And madam, as you were saying, the women and community workers, I mean, we could also have you, I mean, even in IGNOU, that you could have a sensitization program for people, women in the backwaters, that side, who could be just given some kind of a sensitization and awareness and minimum a kind of thing about how to keep their own localities and everything clean. That is something which, in northeast, there are two villages which is supposed to be the world's cleanest village. One is Molinong, the other one is in Nagaland. And those villages are actually, they are villages with, they really look like villages. Like, there is no technology, there's no, but the roads and the streets that they have, and everything is done. They were not taught. It was traditionally there, how, like what you are saying in Kerala also, it was traditionally how these streets were cleaned by those people who lived there. And now it has turned out to be a place of, people come from abroad and come and see the world's cleanest village. And for them, they don't even understand why people are coming. And in fact, sometimes I feel I wish people didn't go there, because if people went there, they're polluting and they're corrupting their mindset. Like, they just, with so much of other things, they're just corrupting their own thing. And when they were left to themselves, they were doing very well. There was nothing there. And Kerala is also one such very, very important commonwealth, which can be just well be.
I fully agree to your point. I fully agree to your point. I think we have had a very, very long session of 2 hours, 36 minutes. And that goes to show the kind of interest that you have generated in all the participants, including our panelists. So, any final thoughts from any of our panelists? Sindhu ma'am?
Sir, not as such, but just as equal to what we just discussed only. That in fact we may be aware that the Kerala government, the question that Charles told, that dumping waste everywhere. I was surprised to see a scheme by the government couple of months back, the Kerala government, telling that towards the concept of zero waste, they have even instituted rewards for people, 2,500 rupees or so. So somebody records and places it in the required place that somebody is publicly dumping waste. So maybe in the months to come, things may become better, perhaps. So even the government is coming up with such schemes. So as rightly told, this is a problem in Kerala still. So nothing else, sir, but it has been a wonderful session, a very learned session from ma'am. You've been great to have you, Rajesh sir. Good to have brought madam here for us. It has been very enriching. That's what I can tell. Thank you, madam. Thank you, sir.
Thank you
all.
so much.
So I think it is time to wind up the session. All good things have to come to an end, and I think just the beginning of something better, because the kind of discussion it has initiated, the kind of thought processes it has brought in light, definitely will serve as just the beginning of many more research activities, many more thought processes, many more practical activities at the ground level. Our students are from all across the country, and therefore they will have their own beautiful practical initiatives put in their local levels. And this session is just the starting point of all such good things. I'm extremely thankful to Sujata ma'am. I have seen her deliver wonderful lectures and wonderful talks on many aspects, including environmental issues, sociology, and of late, I think more of our lectures have been on aspects such as innovation and distance education. I think it was definitely wonderful to have her discussion on ecosystem management on the Northeast, and so many important areas which have been covered today. On behalf of the esteemed panel that we have, and on behalf of all the students of the certificate program in environmental sustainability, we wish to thank you profusely for the wonderful session that you have delivered today. We hope that later on also we can have you for other sessions on various other topics as well, whereby our learning on very vital issues related to sustainable development and can be enhanced. Thank you, ma'am. It has been wonderful having you with us.
Thank you so much.
Uh,
Thank you
I
so much.
thank. I also thank Dr. Sujata Nair, Dr. Jalja Kumari, Dr. Sita Unnikrishnan, and all the students who have actively taken part in this session. Of course, the recording of this session will be available on the same link on which has already been provided to you. So please, I'm sure many of the students could not watch this session live because of their job commitments. And towards the evening or in the coming days, they will be watching this session at the replay. And I thank you all for your wonderful contribution to making this program a success. Thank you, one and all, and we will all meet shortly with another session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
thank you, Dr. Raj. Thank you.